The drill bit punches through solid rock and suddenly meets nothing. Air rushes into the void beyond with a sound like the mountain itself exhaling. When the construction crew peers into the darkness with their flashlights, they see something. That makes no sense. Three skeletal figures arranged around a makeshift table, as if they'd been waiting 45 years for someone to find them. 7 hours earlier. The morning mist clings to the Appalachian ridgeline like cigarette smoke. In a closed room, Elric Thornvale adjusts his hard hat and checks his watch. 6:47 a.m. The new tunnel project for the interstate expansion should be routine, just another day of blasting through limestone and shale. He's been doing this work for 12 years. Ever since he came back from Vietnam with steady hands and a need for solitude that only the mountains can provide. Fire in the hole. The warning echoes through the valley as Elric triggers the controlled explosion. Rock dust billows from the tunnel mouth like a gray ghost, and when it settles, his crew moves forward with their equipment. The plan is simple. Punch through another 50 feet of mountain to connect with the survey markers on the other side. Serafina Duskmore, the project's geologist, frowns at her instruments. Something's wrong with the density readings. The mountain should be solid here according to the 1970s surveys, but her equipment suggests otherwise. She's built her reputation on precision, on reading the Earth's secrets better than anyone in 3 counties. When the mountain whispers, she listens. Elric, she calls out, her voice carrying the kind of urgency that makes experienced miners stop what they're doing. We've got an anomaly. The drill operator, Kalen Viral, pauses mid-bore. He's worked with Serafina long enough to know that tone. In his 15 years underground, he's learned that anomalies in mining operations usually mean one of two things: unexpected wealth or unexpected danger. Sometimes both. The drill bit had been making good progress through the limestone when it suddenly lurched forward, meeting far less resistance than expected. Kalen cuts the engine and calls for lights. The beam of his headlamp disappears into darkness beyond the fresh hole, but there's something else, a smell that doesn't belong. Not the clean scent of fresh-cut stone, but something organic. Something old. Jesus Christ, Kalen mutters, backing away from the drill. There's a cavity in there. A big one. Elric moves closer, his own light joining Kalen's. The hole is roughly 18 inches in diameter, large enough to crawl through if necessary. But the darkness beyond seems to swallow their lights completely. He's seen natural caves before, but this feels different. Deliberate. Serafina consults her geological surveys, cross-referencing with the original mining claims from the 1800s. This section of mountain has been worked before. She can see the old tunnel markings on the historical maps. But those workings were supposed to be sealed, flooded, forgotten. The old Blackthorn mine, she says, her finger tracing the faded lines on the survey. It was abandoned in 1952 after a collapse killed 6 men. The company sealed the entrances and walked away. But if this is the Blackthorn mine, it should be filled with water and debris. The cavity beyond their drill hole should not exist. Elric makes the call to expand the opening. Regulation requires they investigate any unexpected voids before proceeding with the blasting. What should be a simple engineering survey turns into something else entirely when Kalen's enlarged hole reveals the truth. The first thing they see is the table. Rough-hewn from mined timber, it sits in the center of a small chamber carved from the living rock. 3 figures are seated around it, their clothes reduced to tatters, their bodies to bone and sinew. But it's their positions that make Elric's blood run cold. They're arranged as if they'd been having a conversation when death found them. Playing cards are scattered across the table's surface, a game of poker interrupted forever. A coffee pot sits nearby, its contents long since evaporated. And there, scratched into the stone wall behind them, are 3 names: Lyra Stormwind, Talon Greaves, Isolde Nightshade. Serafina checks her historical records with trembling fingers. The names match missing persons reports from 1976. 3 miners who vanished during a routine shift at the Ravenshade silver mine, 20 miles south of their current location. The search went on for weeks, but no trace was ever found. The official report concluded they'd been caught in an underground collapse, their bodies sealed forever beneath tons of rock. But here they are, 45 years later, in a mine that was supposedly sealed 24 years before they disappeared. How the hell did they get here? Kalen whispers, his voice echoing in the confined space. Elric studies the scene with a soldier's eye for detail. The chamber shows signs of long habitation, crude shelving carved into the walls, bedrolls arranged in one corner, and what appears to be a small cooking area. This wasn't a place of sudden death. This was a hideout, a refuge, or a prison. The first mystery deepens when Serafina notices the condition of the chamber itself. The walls are too smooth, too deliberately carved. This isn't natural cave formation or even typical mining work. Someone spent considerable time and effort creating this space, and they did it with tools and techniques that don't match any mining operation from the 1970s. But the second mystery is more disturbing. Near the entrance, scratched into the stone, in the same hand that carved the names, is a single word that changes everything. Murder. The word murder glares from the stone wall like an accusation 45 years in the making. Elric runs his fingers over the carved letters, feeling the deliberate gouges made by desperate hands. The rock here is softer limestone, but it would still take hours to carve letters this deep. Hours of someone knowing they might not live to tell their story any other way. We need to call the sheriff, Serafina says, but her voice lacks conviction. Sheriff's departments in rural counties aren't equipped for cases that span decades, especially when the crime scene sits buried in the heart of a mountain. Elric nods, but his attention is drawn to something else, a leather journal wedged beneath one of the skeletal hands. The cover is mildewed and cracked, but the pages inside remain readable. He carefully extracts it, aware that he's disturbing what might be crucial evidence, but unable to resist the pull of answers. The first entry is dated September 15, 1976, written in a woman's careful script. Day 3 underground. Talon thinks we can reach the old Blackthorn workings if we follow the water seepage. Isolde's ankle is worse, but she won't admit it. We can't go back up. Not after what we saw. What they saw? Elric flips through more pages, searching for context, but the entries become increasingly fragmented. Dates skip around. Some pages are water-damaged beyond reading, and the handwriting grows more erratic as the journal progresses. October 2nd, 1976. The sounds from above stopped 2 days ago. Either they've given up searching or they think we're already dead. Maybe both. Talon found some old mining equipment in the Eastern Passage. If we can get the hand drill working. October 18th, 1976. Isolde is burning with fever. The infection from her ankle has spread. We need medicine, but going to the surface means facing Draven and his people. I'd rather die down here than give him the satisfaction. Draven. Elric makes a mental note of the name. Someone important enough to drive 3 people into hiding underground. Important enough that they'd choose slow death over facing him. Serafina examines the chamber's construction while Elric reads. The tool marks on the walls tell a story of desperate improvisation. Hand drills, chisels, even makeshift hammers carved from scavenged metal. But there are also signs of older work, sections where the stone has been cut with industrial equipment, probably during the original Blackthorn mine operations in the early 1900s. They extended an existing chamber, she concludes. This was probably a natural pocket in the limestone that the old miners opened up for storage or equipment. Our 3 missing people found it and decided to make it livable. But livable for how long? The journal suggests they survived at least 2 months underground, possibly longer. The final readable entry is dated December 1st, 1976. Talon went to check the Eastern Passage 3 days ago and hasn't come back. Isolde passed this morning. I can hear water dripping somewhere, but I'm too weak to search for it. If someone finds this, know that we tried to do the right thing. The photographs are hidden in. The sentence trails off into a legible scrawl, photographs. Evidence of something worth dying to protect. Kalen's voice cuts through their investigation. Folks, we've got company topside. Through the enlarged opening, they can hear vehicles approaching the work site. Multiple engines, moving fast. Elric climbs out of the chamber first, his military training automatically assessing the situation. 3 black SUVs have pulled up to their equipment trailer, and men in expensive suits are stepping out. Not sheriff's department, not state police, federal. The lead figure is a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of posture that suggests authority earned through decades of difficult decisions. She approaches Elric with a badge already displayed. Special Agent Talia Ravenshade. FBI, she says, and Elric catches the irony in her name matching one of the missing miners. I understand you've made a discovery. How did you? Elric begins, but Agent Ravenshade cuts him off. Word travels fast when old cases suddenly develop new leads. We've been monitoring this area for decades, waiting for exactly this kind of breakthrough. Decades. The FBI has been watching this mountain for decades, waiting for someone to find what Lyra Stormwind, Talon Greaves, and Isolde Nightshade died protecting. Seraphina emerges from the chamber, still clutching her geological surveys. Agent Ravenshade, I need to ask, are you related to anyone connected to the original case? The FBI agent's expression doesn't change, but something flickers behind her eyes. My maiden name was Nightshade. Isolde was my older sister. The revelation hangs in the mountain air like smoke. The federal agent investigating this case is the sister of one of the victims, which means this isn't just about 3 missing miners from 1976. This is personal, and it's been personal for 45 years. I need to see what you found. Agent Ravenshade continues, her professional composure intact despite the emotional bombshell she's just dropped. And I need to see it before anyone else contaminates the scene. Elric hands over the journal, but keeps his observations about the carved word murder to himself for now. Something about this situation feels orchestrated, too convenient. Federal agents don't just appear at remote mining sites within hours of a discovery unless they've been positioned and waiting. There's something else, Seraphina says, consulting her instruments. The chamber we found isn't the only void down there. My ground-penetrating radar shows at least 3 more cavities, all connected by passages. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a complex. Agent Ravenshade studies the readings with the intensity of someone who's been waiting her entire career for this moment. How extensive? Could be miles of passages. Some natural, some clearly excavated. And according to these readings, at least, one of them connects to an active water source, which means there might be another way in, or another way out. But as Agent Ravenshade organizes her team to begin a proper archaeological excavation of the site, Elric notices something that makes his combat instincts flare. One of the federal agents is taking photographs not of the discovery site, but of the equipment, the vehicles, and most tellingly, of Elric, Seraphina, and Kalen themselves. They're not just investigating the 45-year-old deaths of 3 miners. They're documenting everyone who found them. The photographs are hidden in the Eastern Passage, exactly where Lyra Stormwind's journal said they would be. But finding them requires crawling through 300 feet of pitch-black tunnel, following scratched arrows that someone carved into the limestone walls with failing strength and fading hope. Elric leads the way, his military-issued flashlight cutting through darkness that seems almost solid after 45 years of absolute silence. Behind him, Agent Ravenshade moves with the careful efficiency of someone who's spent decades preparing for this moment. The fact that she's entering her sister's tomb doesn't show in her professional demeanor, but Elric can hear it in the slightly too controlled rhythm of her breathing. The Eastern Passage is different from the main chamber, where the hideout showed signs of desperate improvisation. This tunnel bears the marks of original mining operations from the early 1900s. Support timbers, though rotting, still hold the ceiling. Rail tracks for or cars disappear into the darkness ahead. This is part of the original Blackthorn mine, the section that was supposed to be sealed and forgotten. Motion, Agent Ravenshade whispers, and Elric freezes. But the movement she's detected isn't human. Water drips steadily from a crack in the ceiling, creating a small pool that reflects their lights like a black mirror. The sound has been echoing through these passages for decades, the mountain's slow pulse that kept 3 desperate people company as they died. The photographs are wrapped in oilcloth and wedged into a natural depression in the tunnel wall, about 4 feet above the floor. Someone, probably Talon Greaves, based on the journal's description of his height, had to stretch to hide them there. The package is surprisingly well preserved, protected by the constant temperature and low humidity of the deep cave environment. Agent Ravenshade unwraps the bundle with trembling hands that she immediately steadies. Inside are 14 black and white photographs, each one a piece of evidence that cost 3 lives to preserve. The first photograph shows the entrance to what appears to be a government facility, complete with unmarked guard towers and razor wire. The architectural style suggests late 1960s or early 1970s construction, all brutal concrete and narrow windows. A small placard near the gate reads, ASHWYND Research Facility. Authorized personnel only. The second photograph is a roster of names, faces, and what appear to be prisoner identification numbers. Elric recognizes some of the faces, young men who could be soldiers or could be civilians. The header at the top of the document reads, Project Grimwold, Behavioral Modification Trial Subjects. Agent Ravenshade's flashlight wavers for just a moment when she reaches the fifth photograph. It shows a group of men in military uniforms standing around what appears to be a medical examination table. The face of the lead figure is unmistakably familiar to anyone who's studied Cold War history, Dr. Corwin Blackthorne, the psychiatrist, whose MKUltra experiments on unwilling subjects were exposed by congressional hearings in 1975. But Dr. Blackthorne was supposed to have disappeared after the hearings, his research destroyed, his facilities shut down. These photographs suggest otherwise. This is why they died, Agent Ravenshade says quietly. My sister and her friends discovered that Blackthorne's research didn't end with the congressional investigation. It just moved underground. Literally underground, according to the remaining photographs. Images of subterranean laboratories, holding cells carved from living rock, and most damning of all, recent photographs of subjects who appear to be local residents. People who went missing from small Appalachian towns throughout the 1970s, written off as runaways or victims of mining accidents. The final photograph shows a document that makes Elric's blood run cold. It's a list of potential test subjects for something called Phase 3 trials, and 3 names are circled in red ink: Lyra Stormwind, Talon Greaves, and Isolde Nightshade. They weren't just witnesses to Blackthorne's continued research. They were targeted for recruitment into his experiments. The water source, Elric says suddenly, pieces clicking together in his mind. Your sister wrote about following water seepage to reach these passages. What if that water connects to the research facility? Agent Ravenshade checks her compass against the tunnel's direction. The Ashwind facility was built into the mountain about 2 miles northeast of here. If there's a natural aquifer running through this limestone, they could have an underground highway leading directly to where Dr. Blackthorne continued his illegal experiments for years after the world thought his work had been shut down. But as they prepare to return to the main chamber with their evidence, Elric hears something that makes his combat instincts scream warnings. Voices echoing down the tunnel from the direction they came. Multiple voices moving toward them with purpose. Agent Ravenshade hears them too and immediately kills her flashlight. In the absolute darkness, they can hear at least 4 people approaching the eastern passage, their footsteps deliberate and coordinated. Professional footsteps. This way, she whispers, pointing deeper into the tunnel system. If there's a water source ahead, there might be another way out. But as they move deeper into the mountain, following passages that haven't seen human footprints since 3 desperate miners fled for their lives in 1976, Elric realizes they're not just retracing the path of Lyra, Talon, and Isolde there. Repeating it, the voices behind them grow closer, and now Elric can make out words. Contain the situation, no witnesses, Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Military terminology for complete operational security, which in practical terms means eliminating anyone who might compromise the mission. The photographs they carry represent 45 years of evidence that could destroy careers, topple government agencies, and expose experiments that violate every treaty on human rights the United States has ever signed. The people hunting them through these tunnels aren't just trying to protect a Cold War secret, they're protecting an ongoing operation. The water source reveals itself as a narrow stream cutting through limestone, its sound masking their footsteps. As they wade deeper into the mountain's hidden circulatory system, Agent Ravenshade moves with surprising agility for someone in federal dress shoes. But 45 years of waiting for this moment have clearly prepared her for anything. The stream leads them through passages that grow progressively more artificial. Natural limestone gives way to concrete-lined tunnels with rusted conduits running along the ceiling. This isn't mining infrastructure, it's something else entirely. Something designed to carry more than water. Ventilation system, Agent Ravenshade whispers, pointing to grills set into the walls at regular intervals. This connects to an active facility. The voices behind them have multiplied. At least 6 people now, possibly more, spreading through the tunnel network with military precision. Elric catches fragments of radio chatter echoing off the walls. Sweep pattern alpha? Exit points secured. Dr. Emberfall wants them alive if possible. Dr. Emberfall. Another name to add to their growing list of people who've been operating in the shadows for decades. The tunnel begins to slope upward, and Elric can smell something besides the mineral scent of underground water. Chemical odors, disinfectant, industrial cleaning agents, and underneath it all, something organic and wrong. The smell of fear that's soaked into concrete over years of use. They reach a junction where 3 passages converge around a circular chamber. Carved into the wall is a bronze plaque bearing the same logo they saw in the photographs. ASHWYND Research Facility, AST 1968. But this plaque is newer, the metal still bright. Whatever happened here didn't end with Dr. Blackthorn's congressional exposure in 1975. Agent Ravenshade photographs the plaque with a small camera she produces from her jacket. Celine Emberfall took over Blackthorn's research in 1977, she explains. Quietly. Officially, she was tasked with dismantling his programs and destroying his data. Unofficially, the sound of approaching footsteps grows louder, forcing them to choose a direction quickly. Agent Ravenshade studies the 3 passages, consulting a small device that looks like a modified GPS unit. This way, she decides, pointing to the passage that slopes most steeply upward. If we can reach the main facility, we might find help. But as they climb toward what they hope is safety, Elric begins to suspect that Agent Ravenshade knows more about this place than she's revealed. Her navigation is too confident. Her knowledge of the facility's layout too detailed for someone who's supposedly discovering it for the first time. The passage ends at a heavy steel door marked, "Authorized personnel only. Level 7 access required." Agent Ravenshade produces a keycard from inside her jacket and swipes it through the electronic reader. The lock disengages with a soft click. "How do you have access to this facility?" Elric demands. "Because I've been working this case for 28 years, she replies, pushing the door open. "And for the last 15 of those years, I've been working it from the inside." They emerge into a sterile corridor lined with fluorescent lights and institutional green paint. The chemical smell is stronger here, mixed with the hum of ventilation, systems, and distant machinery. This is definitely an active facility, not the abandoned relic they expected to find. Door placards reveal the nature of the research: behavioral modification lab, sensory deprivation testing, pharmaceutical trials. Each room represents experiments that were supposed to have ended decades ago, but the fresh security badges hanging beside each door suggest otherwise. "My sister died trying to expose this place," Agent Ravenshade explains as they move through the corridor. "When I joined the FBI, I made it my mission to finish what she started. It took years to infiltrate the Oversight Committee, more years to gain access to the classified files. But I never had physical evidence until today." The photographs in Elric's jacket represent more than historical documentation. They're proof that the illegal experiments that supposedly ended with congressional hearings in 1975 never actually stopped. They just moved deeper underground and found better ways to hide. But their conversation is interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor behind them. The pursuit team has found their way into the main facility, and now they're trapped between discovery and the unknown dangers ahead. Agent Ravenshade leads them deeper into the complex, past laboratories filled with equipment that belongs in a medical facility, not a government research station hidden in a mountain. Through windows and several doors, Elric catches glimpses of examination tables equipped with restraints for stands loaded with unmarked bags of fluid, and monitoring equipment that looks designed to measure more than vital signs. They reach an intersection where a directory on the wall reveals the true scope of the operation. 6 underground levels, each dedicated to different aspects of behavioral modification research. Level 1, subject intake and processing. Level 2, preliminary testing. Level 3, pharmaceutical trials. Level 4, sensory modification. Level 5, memory adjustment. Level 6, disposal and documentation that they're currently on Level 3. Where are the test subjects? Elric asks, but even as the words leave his mouth, he realizes he doesn't want to know the answer. Agent Ravenshade checks her device again, then points to a stairwell marked Emergency Exit Only. We need to reach level 1. That's where the main security office is located, and where I can access the central database to download everything. But as they approach the stairwell, Elric hears something that makes his blood run cold. Voices echoing down from the levels above. Not the pursuit team that's been chasing them through the tunnels. These are different voices. Younger voices. Frightened voices. The current test subjects are still here, still alive, and still undergoing whatever experiments Dr. Emberfall has designed to continue Dr. Blackthorn's legacy. The emergency exit door opens to reveal the stairwell, but also reveals something else. Fresh scratches in the concrete wall, carved with the same desperate technique they saw in the hidden chamber 45 years ago. Someone recent has been trying to leave messages, trying to document what's happening to them. The latest scratches are dated just 3 days ago. The stairwell echoes with the sound of their footsteps and something else, a rhythmic tapping from somewhere above. Morse code, Elric realizes, his military training kicking in. Someone is sending a message, repeating the same pattern over and over. SOS. Help. Basement. Agent Ravenshade stops mid-step, listening to the pattern. They're trying to communicate, she whispers. The current subjects know we're here. The fresh scratches on the wall tell a story of recent captivity. Riven Hollow Glen. Day 47. They took Muriel, and below that, Elias Grimwold. Memory tests. Can't remember home. And finally, most recent, Zara Munvale. If found, tell my family I tried to resist. These aren't decades-old messages from forgotten victims. These are contemporary pleas for help from people who are alive right now, somewhere in this facility. They climb toward level 1, but the pursuit team has anticipated their movement. Radio chatter echoes down the stairwell. Subjects are contained. Dr. Emberfall requests immediate retrieval of the photographs. Minimize collateral damage to federal assets. Federal assets. Agent Ravenshade isn't just an FBI investigator who's been working this case for 28 years. She's been providing inside information to the very people she's supposed to be investigating. Elric stops climbing and turns to face her. You're not here to expose this operation. You're here to protect it. It's more complicated than that, she replies, but her hand moves instinctively toward the service weapon on her hip. The research being conducted here has applications for national security that go far beyond what Dr. Blackthorn originally envisioned. Memory modification, behavioral control, enhanced interrogation techniques. You're talking about torture. Elric cuts her off. You're talking about experimenting on American citizens. I'm talking about protecting American lives, she snaps back. The techniques developed here have prevented terrorist attacks, extracted information from enemy agents, and advanced our understanding of human psychology in ways that benefit everyone. But even as she speaks, the tapping from above continues. SOS. Help. Basement. Real people, imprisoned and experimented on, crying out for rescue. The stairwell door to level 1 opens, revealing a security checkpoint complete with metal detectors and armed guards. But these aren't federal agents. They're private security, the kind of mercenaries who ask fewer questions and leave smaller paper trails. Agent Ravenshade, the lead guard, acknowledges. Dr. Emberfall is waiting for you in the main laboratory. She'd like to speak with your companion as well. Elric realizes he's been walked into a trap that's been 45 years in the making. Agent Ravenshade didn't accidentally appear at their excavation site within hours of the discovery. She's been monitoring the area, waiting for someone to find the hidden chamber and the photographs that could expose the operation. The photographs that she now intends to retrieve and destroy. But as they're escorted through the security checkpoint, Elric catches sight of something that changes everything. A wall display showing the facility's current research subjects. Photographs of local residents who've gone missing over the past several months. Each one labeled with a subject number and research track. Point 1 photograph makes his blood run cold. Serafina Duskmore, labeled as Subject 47, Geological Memory. Extraction, pending transfer. Serafina, who stayed behind at the excavation site to monitor their equipment. Serafina, who was supposed to be safe on the surface while he and Agent Ravenshade investigated the underground complex. Where is she? he demands. But the guards are already moving, escorting them deeper into level 1 toward what the signage indicates is the main laboratory complex. The corridor they follow is lined with observation windows looking into holding cells. Most are empty, but several contain figures in hospital gowns who appear to be sedated or unconscious. In one cell, a young man sits at a small table, repeatedly, writing the same sentence over and over on a piece of paper. "My name is Lucian Darkmere, and I want to go home." In another cell, a woman paces endlessly, muttering numbers under her breath. Her movements are mechanical, repetitive, as if her mind has been reduced to a simple program running on an endless loop. The memory modification protocols, Agent Ravenshade explains, her professional demeanor returning. We can isolate specific memories, enhance them, suppress them, or replace them entirely. The applications for intelligence work are revolutionary. The applications for human rights violations are horrific. Elric counters. They reach the main laboratory, a vast space filled with equipment that looks like a fusion of medical technology and military hardware. Dr. Celine Emberfall stands. In the center of it all, a woman in her 60s with the kind of focused intensity that suggests decades spent pushing ethical boundaries in pursuit of scientific advancement. "Mr. Thornvale," she greets him. "Thank you for bringing us the photographs. They represent the final piece of documentation from Dr. Blackthorn's original research, evidence that we've been trying to locate for decades. To destroy it," Elric states. "To complete it," Dr. Emberfall corrects. Dr. Blackthorn's work was revolutionary, but it was also incomplete. The congressional hearings in 1975 forced him to abandon his research just as he was making breakthrough discoveries about the nature of human memory and consciousness. We've spent the last 45 years continuing his work, perfecting his techniques, and developing applications that serve the national interest. But even as she speaks, Elric can see Serafina through one of the laboratory's observation windows. She's conscious but restrained on an examination table, electrodes attached to her temples, struggling against straps that hold her in place. The experiments aren't ending. They're escalating to Serafina's eyes find Elric through the observation window, and he can see the terror there mixed with something else, determination. She's been fighting whatever they've been doing to her, and she's still conscious enough to recognize him. Doctor Emberfall notices his attention and gestures toward the window with professional pride. Ms. Duskmore has been particularly interesting. Her geological training has given her an unusual spatial memory capacity that we're studying for potential intelligence applications. She can remember underground formations in remarkable detail, which could be valuable for locating enemy installations. "Let her go," Elric demands, but Dr. Emberfall continues as if he hasn't spoken. "The process is quite sophisticated. We use targeted electromagnetic stimulation to access specific memory centers, then introduce artificial constructs that integrate with existing neural pathways. The subject experiences these implanted memories as their own genuine recollections." Agent Ravenshade moves to a control panel, her fingers dancing over switches and dials with practiced familiarity. The applications go beyond intelligence gathering. We can implant memories of training that the subject never actually received, creating instant experts in fields ranging from languages to combat techniques. Through the window, Elric watches as technicians adjust the equipment surrounding Serafina. Her body goes rigid as electrical current flows through the electrodes, and when it stops, her expression changes subtly. Something in her eyes shifts, as if she's remembering something that never happened. "The early trials were crude," Dr. Emberfall continues. "Dr. Blackthorn's subjects often died during the memory implantation process, or emerged with severe psychological damage. But we've refined the techniques considerably. Our current success rate is approximately 87% for basic memory modification, and the other 13%. Elric asks, though he suspects he already knows the answer. "Disposal and documentation, as indicated on our facility directory. Some subjects prove incompatible with the process. Others develop resistance that makes them unsuitable for continued research. Level 6. The basement level where subjects who don't survive the experiments are taken for final processing." But even as Dr. Emberfall explains her methods, Elric notices something that gives him hope. The tapping in the stairwell wasn't random, it was coordinated. The current test subjects have been communicating with each other, organizing some kind of resistance movement from within their cells. Agent Ravenshade approaches him with a syringe filled with clear liquid. "This will make the process easier," she says. "A mild sedative to help you relax while we conduct the initial memory scan. You're going to experiment on me too. Everyone who's seen the photographs needs to undergo memory modification." Dr. Emberfall explains. "We can't have evidence of our operation circulating in the outside world. But don't worry, we'll leave you with memories of a routine mining accident. You'll remember finding some old bones in a cave, turning them over to authorities, and going home to your family. The family he doesn't have. The normal life he's never been able to build because of what he saw in Vietnam, what he did there, what he's been trying to forget ever since." But as Agent Ravenshade moves closer with the syringe, the lights in the laboratory suddenly flicker and die. Emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in red, and the facility's alarm system begins wailing. Through the chaos, Elric hears something that makes his heart race with hope, the sound of multiple doors opening electronically, followed by voices, not guards or technicians, but the voices of people who've been imprisoned for months. The test subjects have found a way to trigger a security lockdown, and they're using the confusion to attempt an escape. "Containment breach on all levels," comes the announcement over the facility's intercom system. "All personnel to emergency stations. Initiate Protocol 7 immediately." Protocol 7. Complete operational security through elimination of witnesses. In the red emergency lighting, Elric can see Dr. Emberfall and Agent Ravenshade moving toward a separate exit, abandoning their equipment and their current test subjects in favor of preserving themselves and their research data. But he can also see Seraphina, still strapped to the examination table, fully conscious now and struggling against her restraints as the facility's automated systems begin what sounds like a self-destruct sequence. The choice is simple. Follow the researchers to safety and let everyone in the facility die, or stay behind and try to save people who've been trapped in this nightmare for months. Elric makes his decision and moves toward the examination room where Seraphina is held. Behind him, Agent Ravenshade shouts something about national security and acceptable losses, but her words are lost in the wailing of alarms and the growing sound of voices echoing through the corridors. The test subjects aren't just escaping, they're fighting back. Seraphina's eyes find Elric through the observation window, and he can see the terror there mixed with something else, determination. She's been fighting whatever they've been doing to her, and she's still conscious enough to recognize him. Dr. Emberfall notices his attention and gestures toward the window with professional pride. Ms. Duskmore has been particularly interesting. Her geological training has given her an unusual spatial memory capacity that we're studying for potential intelligence applications. She can remember underground formations in remarkable detail, which could be valuable for locating enemy installations. "Let her go," Elric demands, but Dr. Emberfall continues as if he hasn't spoken. "The process is quite sophisticated. We use targeted electromagnetic stimulation to access specific memory centers, then introduce artificial constructs that integrate with existing neural pathways. The subject experiences these implanted memories as their own genuine recollections." Agent Ravenshade moves to a control panel, her fingers dancing over switches and dials with practiced familiarity. The applications go beyond intelligence gathering. We can implant memories of training that the subject never actually received, creating instant experts in fields ranging from languages to combat techniques. Through the window, Elric watches as technicians adjust the equipment surrounding Seraphina. Her body goes rigid as electrical current flows through the electrodes, and when it stops, her expression changes subtly. Something in her eyes shifts, as if she's remembering something that never happened. "The early trials were crude," Dr. Emberfall continues. "Dr. Blackthorn's subjects often died during the memory implantation process, or emerged with severe psychological damage. But we've refined the techniques considerably. Our current success rate is approximately 87% for basic memory modification. And the other 13%? Elric asks, though he suspects he already knows the answer. "Disposal and documentation, as indicated on our facility directory. Some subjects prove incompatible with the process. Others develop resistance that makes them unsuitable for continued research. Level 6. the basement level where subjects who don't survive the experiments are taken for final processing. But even as Dr. Emberfall explains her methods, Elric notices something that gives him hope. The tapping in the stairwell wasn't random. It was coordinated. Ag. The current test subjects have been communicating with each other, organizing some kind of resistance movement from within their cells. Agent Ravenshade approaches him with a syringe filled with clear liquid. This will make the process easier, she says. A mild sedative to help you relax while we conduct the initial memory scan. You're going to experiment on me too. Everyone who's seen the photographs needs to undergo memory modification, Dr. Emberfall explains. We can't have evidence of our operation circulating in the outside world. But don't worry, we'll leave you with memories of a routine mining accident. You'll remember finding some old bones in a cave, turning them over to authorities, and going home to your family. The family he doesn't have. The normal life he's never been able to build because of what he saw in Vietnam, what he did there, what he's been trying to forget ever since. But as Agent Ravenshade moves closer with the syringe, the lights in the laboratory suddenly flicker and die. Emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in red, and the facility's alarm system begins wailing. Through the chaos, Elric hears something that makes his heart race with hope, the sound of multiple doors opening electronically, followed by voices, not guards or technicians, but the voices of people who've been imprisoned for months. The test subjects have found a way to trigger a security lockdown, and they're using the confusion to attempt an escape. Containment breach on all levels, comes the announcement over. The facility's intercom system. All personnel to emergency stations. Initiate Protocol 7 immediately. Protocol 7. Complete operational security through elimination of witnesses. In the red emergency lighting, Elric can see Dr. Emberfall and Agent Ravenshade moving toward a separate exit, abandoning their equipment and their current test subjects in favor of preserving themselves and their research data. But he can also see Seraphina, still strapped to the examination table, fully conscious now and struggling against her restraints as the facility's automated systems begin what sounds like a self-destruct sequence. The choice is simple. Follow the researchers to safety and let everyone in the facility die, or stay behind and try to save people who've been trapped in this nightmare for months. Elric makes his decision and moves toward the examination room where Seraphina is held. Behind him, Agent Ravenshade shouts something about national security and acceptable losses, but her words are lost in the wailing of alarms and the growing sound of voices echoing through the corridors. The test subjects aren't just escaping, they're fighting back. The examination room door's electronic lock disengages with a soft click as the facility's security systems continue to malfunction. Elric rushes to Seraphina's side, working quickly to unbuckle the leather restraints holding her to the table. The electrodes leave angry red marks on her temples when he removes them, but her eyes are clear and focused. How long was I under? She asks, her voice hoarse but determined. Less than an hour, Elric replies, helping her sit up. But they've been planning this for decades. Agent Ravenshade, she's not who she claimed to be. Seraphina nods grimly. I heard enough before they sedated me. The geological surveys they wanted from me weren't about the tunnel project. They needed to map the entire underground network to expand their facility. Through the laboratory's main window, they can see chaos unfolding in the corridor beyond. Test subjects in hospital gowns are moving with surprising coordination, some carrying makeshift weapons fashioned from medical equipment. The young man Elric saw earlier, Lucian Darkmere, is among them, but his repetitive, programmed behavior has been replaced by sharp intelligence and purpose. The memory modification process, Seraphina explains, reading Elric's confusion. They implanted false memories of compliance and helplessness, but they couldn't completely suppress our real personalities. We've been pretending to be broken while we planned this escape. The facility's intercom crackles to life again. All subjects to return to designated containment areas immediately. Use of lethal force has been authorized, but the test subjects aren't returning to their cells. They're moving systematically through the facility, releasing others and gathering evidence of what's been done to them. The tapping in the stairwell wasn't just a cry for help. It was a coordination signal for a carefully planned uprising. Elric and Seraphina join the group in the corridor, where Lucian Darkmere has emerged as a natural leader. Despite months of psychological manipulation, he's managed to maintain enough of his original identity to organize resistance. We need to reach the surface before they activate the facility's destruction protocols, he tells them. But first, we have to get everyone out of Level 6. Level 6, Disposal and Documentation. The basement level where subjects who didn't survive the experiments have been taken. How many people are still alive down there? Elric asks. We don't know, admits a woman named Brielle Starcrest, whose memories of her former life as a nurse have helped her tend to injured escapees. Some subjects are taken to Level 6 and never come back. Others return days later with no memory of where they've been. The group moves toward the stairwell, but their path is blocked by security forces armed with weapons designed for more than crowd control. These aren't standard security guards. They're equipped for eliminating witnesses and cleaning up evidence. They're going to kill everyone, Serafina realizes. Even the researchers who've been running the experiments. Protocol 7 doesn't just mean eliminating witnesses. It means eliminating the entire operation. Through a window overlooking the facility's main parking area, they can see Agent Ravenshade and Dr. Emberfall being escorted toward waiting helicopters by men in military fatigues. The researchers who've spent decades perfecting human experimentation techniques are being evacuated while their test subjects are left to die in a controlled explosion that will look like a mining accident. But Lucien Darkmere has one more surprise. From his hospital gown, he produces a small device that looks like a modified radio transmitter. Before they captured me, I was an electronics engineer, he explains. I've been working on this for months, using components I scavenged during medical procedures. It's a signal broadcaster that can override the facility's communication systems. The device activates with a soft beep, and suddenly the facility's intercom system is no longer under Dr. Emberfall's control. This is Lucien Darkmere, speaking from inside the Ashwin Research Facility. His voice echoes through every corridor and laboratory. For months, American citizens have been held here against their will and subjected to illegal medical experiments. The people responsible are attempting to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. We need immediate assistance from legitimate federal authorities. The broadcast continues for 30 seconds before the facility's jamming systems cut it off. But 30 seconds is enough. Somewhere outside this mountain, people are now aware that the Ashwin Research Facility exists, that illegal experiments are being conducted, and that people are trapped inside. But awareness doesn't guarantee rescue, especially when the people responsible have 45 years of experience covering up their activities. The sound of approaching helicopters grows louder, and through the facility's windows, they can see military vehicles surrounding the mountain. The evacuation of key personnel is complete, and the final phase of Protocol 7 is about to begin. In the distance, Elric can hear the distinctive sound of charges being set, the same controlled explosions he's been using for tunnel construction, but scaled up to destroy an entire underground complex. They have minutes, maybe less, before the mountain comes down on top of them. The explosion charges detonate in sequence, starting from the upper levels and working downward. The concussive waves shake dust from the ceiling and set the emergency lights swaying like metronomes counting down to doom. Elric's military experience tells him they have maybe 10 minutes before the cascade of controlled demolitions reaches their level. Lucien leads the group of escaped test subjects toward what he calls the Old Way Out, a passage that predates the modern facility, carved during the original Blackthorn mine operations in the early 1900s. It's the same route that Lyra Stormwind, Talon Greaves, and Isolde Nightshade tried to use 45 years ago when they fled with their evidence. The difference is, we know where they went wrong, explains Zara Moonvale, a cartographer whose geographical memory has proven resistant to the facility's modification techniques. They followed the water flow thinking it would lead them to safety. But the water flows deeper into the mountain, not toward the surface. The group moves through corridors that grow progressively older as they retreat from the modern facility. Concrete gives way to limestone, fluorescent lighting to emergency battery packs, and the sterile smell of the laboratory to the mineral scent of natural caves. Behind them, the controlled explosions continue their methodical destruction. Level 2 collapses with a roar that shakes the entire mountain. Dust billows through the passages, and several of the weaker test subjects stumble from the combination of physical exhaustion and whatever drugs are still working through their systems. How many of us are there? Elric asks as they help an elderly man named Garrick Ironmore who's been used for pharmaceutical trials that have left him barely able to walk. 43 that we know of, Brielle Starcrest reports. But some subjects were taken to level 6 weeks ago, and we haven't been able to reach them. Level 6, the basement level that's been sealed off since the escape began. If there are survivors down there, they're about to be buried alive under tons of rock and debris. Serafina stops at a junction where the passage splits 3 ways. Her geological training, enhanced by whatever memory modifications the researchers attempted, allows her to read the rock formations like a book. The middle passage leads to the original mine entrance, but it's been sealed with concrete since the 1950s, she reports. The left passage connects to the water system that Lyra and her friends followed. It's a dead end that goes deeper instead of up. But the right passage, she traces her fingers along tool marks in the limestone, reading the story carved into stone by miners who died decades before any of them were born. The right passage was cut as an emergency exit during World War II, when the mine was used for strategic mineral extraction. It should connect to a vertical shaft that leads to the surface about half a mile from the main facility. Should, in an underground complex that's about to collapse around them. Should isn't the kind of certainty they need. But before they can debate alternatives, the decision is made for them. The sound of approaching footsteps echoes from the passage. Behind them, security forces who survived the upper-level explosions and are now hunting the escaped test subjects through the tunnel system. The group splits without discussion. Lucian leads the stronger subjects toward the emergency exit passage, while Elric and Serafina take a smaller group toward level 6 to attempt a rescue of anyone still trapped there. You've got 15 minutes, Lucian tells them. After that, this whole section of mountain is coming down regardless of who's still inside. Elric nods and heads toward the stairwell that leads to the facility's lowest level. Behind him, Serafina and 3 volunteer subjects, Brielle Starcrest, Zara, Moonvale, and a young man named Torin Wolfsbane whose physical strength has made him invaluable during the escape. Follow despite the increasing danger. Level 6 is a maze of corridors lined with rooms that serve purposes too disturbing to contemplate. Disposal and documentation turns out to mean something worse than simple elimination of failed test subjects. The researchers have been conducting post-mortem studies, harvesting tissue samples, and maintaining detailed records of every aspect of their experimental failures. But they also find something that gives them hope: a ward containing 12 subjects who are alive but heavily sedated. These are people who proved resistant to memory modification, subjects whose minds couldn't be broken or reshaped according to Dr. Emberfall's specifications. They were going to be terminated tomorrow, whispers Nissa Shadowfen, a psychiatric nurse who was captured while investigating disappearances in her hometown. I heard the technicians talking about it during my last medical procedure. The sedated subjects include several people from local communities, a teacher named Elira Dawnspire, a mechanic named Caius Thornfell, and most surprisingly, Kalen Viral, the drill operator who stayed behind at the excavation site when Elric and Agent Ravenshade first entered the tunnel system. Kalen's presence confirms what Elric has begun to suspect. The discovery of Lyra, Talone, and Isolde's remains wasn't accidental. Someone has been monitoring the excavation site for years, waiting for the right moment to expose the hidden chamber and draw new subjects into their research program. The mountain shudders as another series of explosions destroys what remains of the upper levels. They have minutes to get the sedated subjects mobile and moving toward the emergency exit passage. But as they work to revive the drugged prisoners, Elric hears something that changes everything. Voices echoing down the stairwell. From above, not security forces, but new voices. Official voices with the crisp pronunciation of federal agents who aren't part of Dr. Emberfall's operation. That Lucian's radio broadcast worked. Legitimate authorities have arrived at the facility, and they're conducting their own rescue operation. The question is whether they'll arrive in time to prevent the complete destruction of evidence that could expose 45 years of illegal human experimentation. The new voices belong to a joint task force led by Special Agent Oren Steelstride. of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and Major Callista Emberlin from Army Criminal Investigation Command. Unlike Agent Ravenshade, these federal agents have arrived with a warrant, backup, and most importantly, no advanced knowledge of the facility's true purpose. Federal agents. Agent Steelstride's voice echoes down the stairwell. Identify yourselves. And your status. Survivors. Elric calls back. We have 12 unconscious subjects who need immediate medical attention. The response comes quickly. A full extraction team with medical personnel, evidence technicians, and enough firepower to secure whatever remains of the facility. But they're working against both time and the systematic destruction of evidence. That's been planned for decades. Major Emberlin coordinates the evacuation of Level 6, while Agent Steelstride documents everything with the methodical precision of someone who understands they're looking at a case that will rewrite the history of government accountability. How long has this facility been operational? He asks Elric while medics work to stabilize the sedated subjects. Officially? Since 1968. Unofficially? They've been continuing Dr. Blackthorn's MKUltra research since the congressional hearings. Supposedly shut it down in 1975. The photographs Elric still carries represent only a fraction of the evidence, but they're enough to establish a timeline that spans multiple presidential administrations and involves dozens of government agencies that either participated in or ignored illegal human experimentation for nearly half a century. Serafina leads Agent Steelstride through the facility's remaining accessible areas, her geological expertise helping him understand the scope of the underground complex. This isn't just a research facility, she explains. It's a network of connected installations throughout this mountain range. The water system we followed connects to at least 3 other sites. The implications are staggering. Dr. Emberfall's operation isn't an isolated facility conducting rogue experiments. It's part of a distributed network that's been operating in secret for decades, using the natural cave systems of Appalachian mountains to hide research that violates every ethical standard established since the Nuremberg trials. But even as federal agents document evidence and evacuate survivors, the controlled demolitions continue. Dr. Emberfall's escape plan includes destroying not just the main facility, but key sections of the tunnel network that could lead investigators to other installations. We need to reach the surface, Major Emberlin announces. Intelligence indicates this facility is equipped with a failsafe that will collapse the entire underground complex in approximately 8 minutes. The evacuation becomes a race through passages that grow increasingly unstable as support structures fail and ceiling sections begin to collapse. The sedated subjects are carried on makeshift stretchers, while the escape test subjects who've regained their strength help guide federal agents through tunnels they've mapped during months of imprisonment. Lucian. Darkmir's group has reached the emergency exit shaft and established communication with surface teams. The vertical shaft is equipped with an industrial elevator that was last serviced in the 1940s, but it's still functional enough to lift small groups to safety. But the elevator can only carry 6 people at a time, and they have 43 survivors, plus federal agents to evacuate before the mountain comes down. Elric makes the calculation that's haunted him since Vietnam. Who lives and who dies when there isn't enough time to save everyone? Injured first, he decides, helping load the most severely affected test subjects onto the elevator. Then the evidence. Agent Steelstride has been collecting files, computer drives, and research documentation that could expose the full scope of the operation. This evidence represents the only chance to hold people accountable for decades of illegal experimentation, but it also represents weight that could prevent them from evacuating everyone. The mountain shudders as major support structures fail in the levels below them. Through the shaft opening, they can see daylight, real sunlight, not the fluorescent simulation of the underground facility, but daylight that's still several elevator trips away for most of the survivors. Serafina grabs Elric's arm as another group boards the elevator. The tunnel system, she says urgently. If Dr. Emberfall's network extends throughout this mountain range, then other facilities are still operational. Other subjects are still being held. The rescue of 43 people from the Ashwin facility is just the beginning. Based on the evidence they've gathered, there could be hundreds of victims held in similar installations, subjected to experiments that have been refined and perfected over decades of secret research. the elevator returns for another load of survivors. But the mountain's final collapse sequence has begun. Deep underground, the failsafe charges detonate in a pattern designed to seal every passage, destroy every piece of evidence, and create the appearance of a natural mining disaster. As the sixth elevator load ascends towards safety, Elric realizes that some stories don't have clean endings. 45 years ago, 3 miners died trying to expose this operation. Today, 43 people have been rescued, but Dr. Emberfall and her research team have escaped to continue their work elsewhere. The war between those who would sacrifice individual lives for perceived national security benefits and those who believe human dignity is non-negotiable continues in the shadows, fought in places the public will never know exist. But for the first time in decades, the victims have won a battle. 3 months after the Ashwin facility collapse, Elric stands at the edge of the excavation site where everything began. The interstate tunnel project has been permanently suspended, the area declared a federal crime scene, and the mountain sealed off while investigators continue to map the underground network that Dr. Emberfall's operation used for nearly 5 decades. The official death toll from the mining accident lists 47 casualties, but Elric knows the real number is both smaller and larger. Smaller because 43 people survived who were supposed to disappear forever. Larger because the network of facilities extends throughout the Appalachian Range, and they've only begun to locate the other installations, Agent Steele strides. Investigation has already led to arrests in 3 federal agencies and the discovery of 2 additional research sites. The photographs that Lyra Stormwind died protecting have become the foundation of a congressional inquiry that promises to expose decades of illegal human experimentation conducted under the cover of national security. But Dr. Celine Emberfall remains at large, along with most of her research team and all of their accumulated data on memory modification techniques. Serafina approaches across the worksite, carrying a folder of geological surveys that tell a story the public will never fully understand. Her memory modifications were only partially successful, leaving her with enhanced spatial awareness, but also with gaps where her original memories should be. The water system connects to 17 separate locations, she reports. Some are natural caves, others are abandoned mining operations that were converted for research purposes. The oldest installations date back to the 1940s. 17 locations. 17 potential facilities where people might still be held, where experiments might still be conducted, where the work that began with Dr. Blackthorn's MKUltra research continues in forms that have evolved far beyond anything the original congressional hearings imagined. Lucian Darkmere has become the unofficial spokesperson for the survivors, working with federal investigators to map the full scope of Dr. Emberfall's operation. His electronics expertise, combined with fragments of memory that survived the modification attempts, has helped identify funding sources that trace back to defense contractors and intelligence agencies that officially disbanded their human research programs decades ago. It's not over, he tells Elric during one of their regular meetings with federal investigators. The research continues somewhere else, with new subjects, new techniques, new ways to hide from oversight. But it's also not the same. The exposure of the Ashwin facility has broken a cycle of secrecy that protected illegal research for 50 years. Congressional hearings are scheduled, oversight committees are being formed, and most importantly, the survivors are alive to tell their stories. In a small cemetery outside the town where Lyra Stormwind, Talon grieves, and Isolde Nightshade once lived, 3 new graves mark the final resting place of people who died as heroes, not victims. The photographs they protected have served their purpose, and the truth they died for has finally been exposed. But Elric knows that truth is only the first step toward justice. Agent Ravenshade was found dead in the helicopter that was supposed to evacuate her to safety. An apparent suicide that federal investigators suspect was actually elimination by her own handlers to prevent her from revealing information about other operations. Her death represents both justice and a warning. The people responsible for decades of illegal experimentation don't hesitate to eliminate their own operatives when necessary. The mountain stands scarred but not broken, its limestone heart still holding secrets that may take years to fully uncover. The old Blackthorn mine, the Ashwin research facility, and the network of tunnels that connected them to installations throughout the region have become a monument to both human cruelty and human resilience. 43 people survived who were supposed to disappear. That number represents families reunited, stories preserved, and evidence that will prevent future atrocities. But it also represents an ongoing responsibility to continue searching for others who might still be trapped in facilities that haven't yet been discovered. As Elric watches federal agents continue their excavation of the site, where 3 skeletal figures were found arranged around a makeshift table, he thinks about the conversation they were having when death found them 45 years ago. They were playing poker, sharing coffee, and planning their next move in a game where the stakes were nothing less than the fundamental question of whether individual human dignity matters more than collective security. They lost that hand. But they didn't lose the game. The cards are still on the table. The conversation continues, and somewhere in the mountains of Appalachia, people who thought they'd been forgotten are waiting for rescue teams that now know where to look. The trio of miners who vanished in 1976 are finally home. Their camp has been discovered, their story has been told, and their sacrifice has meaning. But their work isn't finished. It may never be finished. And that's exactly as it should be. The investigation into the Ashwin Research Facility Network continues. If you have information about missing persons in rural areas between 1968 and the present, federal authorities encourage you to contact the National Missing Persons Database. Some stories end. Some stories begin. This one transforms.